The Progress Out of Poverty Index, or PPI, is the poverty measurement tool for organizations with a mission to serve the poor. This presentation by Grameen Foundation explains how a PPI is made. Each PPI is made for one country. Currently, there are PPIs for over 45 countries worldwide. Every year, Grameen Foundation develops PPIs for new countries or updates existing PPIs. The PPI is developed for each country through the collaboration of Grameen Foundation, Mark Schreiner of Microfinance Risk Management, and partners in the field, such as microfinance institutions that provide valuable feedback on each indicator. The first step in developing the PPI is obtaining the underlying national data set. The 10 questions that make up the PPI scorecard are pulled from a country's national expenditure or income survey. Typically, these surveys compile information from thousands of households and, depending on the country, can range from 4,000 to 200,000 households nationally. These data sets are full of information on countries' populations related to household expenditure, housing, such as the main material used for the floor, education, such as the education level of the head of the household, household composition, such as the number of members, ownership of durable goods, such as televisions and refrigerators, and employment status, such as whether they are self-employed, salaried, etc. Mark Schreiner uses a statistical method to measure the level of association that each indicator has with poverty. Poverty is defined as household expenditure below a poverty line. This measure is known as the uncertainty coefficient. For example, we can find the level of association between certain housing materials and the incidence of poverty of those living there. The higher the association, the better the indicator is at measuring poverty. In the case of Peru, whose uncertainty coefficient table is shown here, the main material of exterior walls is the indicator with the highest level of association to poverty. The indicators with the highest degree of association to poverty are then assessed for eligibility to be used in the final PPI. In the case of Peru, about 150 indicators were assessed. The list of indicators for each country can be found in each PPI design documentation memo. The top indicators are assessed and kept for further review if they are inexpensive to collect, easy to answer quickly, simple to verify, and liable to change over time as poverty status changes. The PPI aims to measure changes in poverty through time. This means that when selecting indicators and holding other considerations constant, preference is given to more sensitive indicators. For example, ownership of a blender is probably more likely to change in response to changes in poverty than the marital status of the head of the household. Then, using the indicators that meet the criteria in the previous slide, a series of 2 indicator surveys are made based on the indicator that most powerfully predicts poverty by itself. The 2 indicator surveys whose combined measure of association to poverty are highest then move on to have a 3rd indicator added. These steps are repeated until the scorecard has 10 indicators. Between 15 and 20 potential PPI indicators are sent for a review and field testing. During the review, local and global stakeholders provide commentary and feedback on each of the indicators. During the review, we learn if indicators are no longer relevant because of changes in reality or more difficult to ask than anticipated. During field testing, each indicator is tested in a setting that resembles how the PPI will be used. During this testing, we discover if questions are confusing, hard to answer, or error-prone during data collection. The qualitative and quantitative feedback and results are taken into consideration and weighed against the accuracy levels in the final indicator's selection. The qualitative information derived from the review and testing are used to build interview guides and supporting materials to assist organizations in collecting the indicators. Weighing the results from the review and testing process with other statistical criteria, the final 10 indicator survey is determined. Points are derived for every response option. These points are based on values from a statistical analysis that provides the relative weight of each indicator in predicting poverty. The possible combinations of answers to each indicator can equal a final score from 0, most likely below the poverty line, to 100, least likely below a poverty line. Indicators with the highest levels of association to poverty in relation to the other indicators will influence the final score more than indicators with lower levels. Scorecards by themselves do not indicate the likelihood that an individual falls below a certain poverty line. Lookup tables are used to link PPI scores to poverty likelihood values for various poverty lines. In the example shown from Peru, we see that a household with a PPI score of 41 has a 23% likelihood of falling below the poverty line. Lookup tables provide objective, easy-to-find poverty likelihoods associated with a complete set of score ranges. The 23% in the lookup table is derived from the National Survey dataset. The households in the National Survey dataset, which were not used to create the PPI scorecard, are assigned a score using the final PPI scorecard. Using the expenditure data included in the original survey, the percentage of total households within a certain score range that fall below a poverty line is known. For example, in Peru, 9,982 households scored between 40 and 44. Of those households, 2,328, or 23.3%, had expenditure below the national poverty line. This means when using the PPI, a household with a score between 40 and 44 has a 23.3% likelihood of falling below the national poverty line. For more information about the Progress Out of Poverty Index, visit www.progressoutofpoverty.org. To learn more about Mark Schreiner, the developer of the PPI, please visit microfinance.com.